electricity works in the vehicle, and the manners and the technologies involved. So we've got to start there, and I think there's a few questions going to happen.
I'm Naomi from Zippy Bikes. As you can see, our bikes are here, lovely. I have a solution. Why don't they do renewable charge points, like pods that are built with solar panels, and then people can charge them up from that? Or give a grant for each individual to have some sort of solar or wind or renewable energy. More investment in that. Thank you.
Very interesting question. Would you like to make a brief comment on that, gentlemen, before
I'll
I
have a
move
quick
on to
stab
the next?
at the answer. PV, photovoltaic technology, just like the other new technologies that are coming on stream now, first of all, remain stubbornly expensive, although I do think that if you build huge factories, you will start to achieve the massive discounts. But just speaking as a sort of physicist engineer, I'm not saying there's no scenario in which that can work. There's a lot of scenarios in which solar power can be used to power all kinds of things we're not doing with it today. But just looking at today's PV and today's vehicles, which of course are made of metal and are very heavy, rather than the composites that will be made of in the future, one hopes, you'd have to cover something the size of in the entire I mean, I know Sainsbury's is one of the supermarkets looking at providing free electricity for the next few years for people rolling up in their EVs. But just if everybody did that, looking at the scale of how much PV you'd need to cover for running a car today, you'd really only be able to run a very small number of cars, maybe 10% maximum of those who are going to the supermarket, and that's covering pretty much every bit of available space. So yes, I was going to say, yes, I think the various types of solar technology, including PV, which will improve, can be used much more efficiently. But if what you're suggesting is the same kind of PV that works very nicely on, for example, parking meters, where you have a very low electric charge, to use that for actually propelling people and the heavy metal objects they drive in, you'll find that the numbers it's different orders of magnitude to what you need to power those vehicles. So I'm not saying no, never, but right now the technologies don't fit. You're shaking your head, so I'll be interested to the answer on that.
I've got a couple other things I could add to that as well. I think.
If we could just come down the line, that would be lovely.
Fine.
I'd love to have your thoughts on
that. I think it's a good question. I mean, to the first part, are there going to be stations with solar panels? I mean, 2 weeks ago in the Sunday Times In Gear section, they actually had a big double-page article on an American company that is right now buying up all the petrol stations apparently in London and will be converting this into incentives. So rest assured, your Zippy bikes are going to be well charged. However, I think when it comes to grants for individuals to have charging at home, I mean, I'd like a grant every time I take my rubbish out. I'd like a petrol station on my front door, so I'd never have to do anything. I think it's the world you live in has got lovely unicorns in it, but unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get that.
I understand from the engineers that if we did all use photoelectric cells, we'd need the whole of Lincolnshire to. If we needed a biomass, we'd need the whole of Lincolnshire. But if you need photoelectric cells, we need the whole of Rutland. So we wouldn't need that much space. But it is the technology, and the technology does change over time. I'm more concerned about the way we use planning permission for new supermarkets and so forth. You can kick-start these arrangements by saying that if you have car parks out of town, then such a proportion of them have to have meters on them. It might not be cost-effective, but it does start things going in the beginning, and it would give them some brownie points as well. I'm also like Malcolm, I'm very concerned about the way we look for grants for everything. We hear that people using electric vehicles might get this £3,000 fine, which is all very exciting if you sell electric vehicles. But surely we should give even more to people who cycle, because they don't use much energy at all. And surely even more money to people who walk. And people like me who never go out because I've got a very sad life, I should get at least £10,000 a year just for sitting at home and reading a book. So we've got to be careful about grants, because once you start giving grants, it's very hard to take them away later. So although it's good news and its symbolism is very great, we've got to be careful about giving everybody everything in the future for just doing something that is only marginally better than staying at home and reading a good book.
That's a very good point. On the electric charging sort of points from solar energy and wind power, and we do have those on a sort of national network of signs. I think the parking meter situation was just elevated a moment ago. These are much lower power requirements than we have for motive power. So although it's a great idea having photovoltaic cells and wind generators that are by the side of the road, basically charging up some system that we can then just dump into our battery systems on our motorcycles and cars. So the other problem that we are going to face is that the motorcycles and cars we see here are all from different manufacturers. And I'm sure we all face the same problem. I'm sure we've got a cross-section of Apple Mac users and PC users in the room. Try and plug an Apple Mac mouse into a PC and see how far you get. The problems you're going to have are different voltages, different current requirements, different sockets to fit these things in. And I think this is going to have a massive impact on the standardization of how we charge electric vehicles. And again, it's probably another one of those the situations that I was alluding to earlier on, where batteries need to be charged in a self-contained unit. If you can generate the power on the vehicle, then you don't need to plug it in. Now, the problem of generating power on the vehicle is again, energy density, and hydrogen is one answer, and nuclear actually is a very convenient answer. It raises other issues as well. They're not very easy issues to cover, but they are issues that we need to discuss. But generating the power on the vehicle, I think, is the answer. The other thing about batteries, obviously, as well, is batteries are a medium for storing energy. And any engineers that are in the room would probably be able to tell you that you can't actually create energy. You can only change it from one form to another. And when you change it, you lose a little bit of it. When you lose energy, it's wasted. You can't get it back. So batteries are a storage of that energy, and you've had to burn some fossil fuels or some biodiesel, or you've turned some wind turbines to generate that electricity to store in the battery. And when you put it into the battery, it loses a little bit. And when you take it back out of the battery again to put into your motor, it loses a little bit more. So there are a number of issues with these sort of situations. But charging points at the side of the road, fantastic idea, but we've got a long way to go before they're a realistic solution.
Well, I'm very supportive of the idea, but I agree completely with Stephen. There's a limit to how much of our transport solutions can be served by this means. And so I would say that there's one word in the question that I'd particularly like to point out, and that was the word "the" before solution. There is a danger that we think there is a solution. And the solution actually comes from a number of different sources in combination. And to think of anything as the solution is certainly the easiest way to approach things. It's the way we have approached things, but it's a bit of a sledgehammer to crack a nut. And so I just urge caution on the extent to which that can solve the problem.
Can I come back very briefly on a couple of things raised? First of all, just to come back to your original question, I think it's also worth pointing out that the separation between how we deal with our buildings and the rest of the energy users in our life and transport, which has been separate up until now, that is going to converge, that is going to come together. There'll be lots of exciting things. I think even in some circumstances you may be driving cars up to buildings and actually powering the building from the car if you've fueled the car in a sustainable way. And indeed, you know, one of the problems of the way we use energy, electrical energy, is these huge peaks. So if we could use our cars to try to flatten those peaks, that would already have a great impact. And as I say, I'm very supportive of solar energy, but sustainability is the end game. There will be huge advances in PV technology. We possibly will need solar energy in the tropics of the Sahara Desert to drive massive chemical processes that start sucking the CO2 that we've already put too much of into the atmosphere in future years. I don't know. But I'm really commenting on where PV is today. I've been involved in projects that are trying to make hydrogen, for example, from wind as well as PV. So I have an idea of the kinds of quantities and scales, which is pretty similar to charging vehicles. So I'm not saying no, never, but we're some way from that utopia. It's also not wrong to say that it might not be a bad idea to do some of those as demo projects, because there are always lots of things you learn from demo projects that can go on and inform other engineering and other developments outside that. A very quick point on grants before I shut up. Sometimes it's politically difficult for a government to fund their own industry because of various international agreements, and indeed governments sometimes try to get away with funding their car industries that are struggling by saying we're actually funding the green program, so it's okay, that's allowed. But just for a scale, let's say for every £1 you invest, it's a bit like building something in a factory or building it on site. For every £1